Evelyn's brother looked her in the eyes and said, "I'm sorry. You know too much." Then his hands slammed into her chest, and she was falling off the bridge, into the freezing river with her brother's betrayal echoing in her ears. 3 miles away, Edward felt something tear through his chest like a dying scream. He ran without thinking, following an instinct he didn't understand. When he pulled an unconscious woman from the water, he saw the bond mark on her wrist. She belonged to another, to his greatest enemy. And the smart choice, the only choice for a king, was to let her go. But when she opened her eyes and whispered, "Please don't send me back to him," Edward made a decision that would cost him everything he'd built. Expose the darkness rotting beneath crowns, all for a woman he couldn't walk away from. The cold was annihilating. Evelyn hit the water, and the impact punched the air from her lungs, turned her limbs to useless weight. The current grabbed her immediately. The Corin River ran brutal this time of year and dragged her under. Her heavy cloak became a death sentence, pulling her down into the black. The rapid current caught her like a giant's fist, spinning her sideways, then down. She kicked hard, felt her boot connect with something solid, a rock, maybe, and used it to push upward. Her hand broke the surface for half a second, fingers grasping at nothing but freezing air, before another current yanked her back under. Her shoulder slammed into an unseen boulder, and pain exploded white behind her eyes. She couldn't tell which way was up anymore, couldn't make her exhausted muscles obey. "This is easier," she thought as the fight drained out of her. "Better than what's waiting," because going back to Dane meant death anyway. The water filled her mouth. Her lungs burned, then went numb. Above her, she could see light filtering through the surface, pale and distant, impossibly far away. "I'm sorry," she thought, though she didn't know who the apology was for anymore. "I tried." Everything went black. Edward crashed through the forest like a man, possessed, his captain Matteo struggling to keep pace behind him. "Your Majesty, what—" "Quiet." Edward's voice came out as a growl. He couldn't explain the compulsion driving him forward, didn't have words for it. Just that wrongness in his chest, growing worse with every second, like something vital was being ripped away from the world. He burst through the tree line and saw the river churning below, fast and brutal, carrying debris from the mountains. And there, caught in the shallows near the opposite bank, a dark shape that his wolf recognized instantly as human. Face down, not moving. Edward didn't think. He launched himself off the bank, hitting the water in a dive that took him deep. The cold was vicious, but he barely felt it. His wolf ran hot enough to keep hypothermia at bay. He surfaced, spotted her 30 feet downstream, and swam hard against the current. Before we continue, please take 2 seconds to like this video. It tells me you want more stories like this. When his fingers closed around her arm, something deep inside him recognized her. Not her face or her scent. He'd never seen this woman before, but something deeper. Something that resonated in his bones like a struck bell, like his soul had been searching for her and was now screaming that she was here. She was real, and she needed him. Edward hauled her against his chest and kicked for shore, fighting the current with every stroke. She was dead weight, her body limp and cold, her lips already blue. "Hold on, you're okay." He dragged them both onto the muddy bank on the far side. Matteo was already splashing across the shallows, his face grim. "Is she— help me." Edward flipped her onto her side, struck her back with controlled force. Water poured from her mouth, but she didn't respond. He rolled her flat, tilted her head back, and breathed for her. 2 breaths, then compressions, counting the rhythm that had been drilled into him since childhood. "Come on, don't leave me." No response. Her lips were gray, her skin like ice. Matteo dropped to his knees beside them. "Your Majesty, she's been under too long." I said help me. Edward's voice came out savage. He started compressions again, pushing harder, willing her heart to remember how to beat. That strange recognition was still there, that pull, and it was screaming at him that she couldn't die. She wasn't allowed to die. He'd just found her. On the 6th round, she convulsed. Water came up, river water and bile, and then she was gasping, choking, her whole body seizing as her lungs remembered how to work. Her eyes flew open, unfocused and wild with terror. "You're safe," Edward said, his hands impossibly gentle on her shoulders despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "You're breathing." She tried to speak, but only managed a broken sound. Her body was shaking so hard he could hear her teeth chattering. Edward stripped off his heavy cloak and wrapped it around her, pulling her into a sitting position so she could breathe easier. That's when he saw it, the mark on her left wrist, revealed when the wet sleeve of her dress fell back. A bond mark, intricate and unmistakable, the kind that formed when an alpha's claim was sealed. The design was specific, unique to each pairing. Edward knew this one. He'd seen it on banners flying over enemy encampments, burned into the flesh of prisoners who'd been sent back as warnings. The crescent moon over crossed blades. This was Dane Ashland's mark. Edward's blood went cold even as that inexplicable recognition inside him howled in protest. "Mine," his wolf insisted. "She's mine." But she wasn't. She was bound to the Alpha King of Shadowfen, the man who'd spent the last decade trying to expand his territory into Greymont's lands, the man whose forces had killed Edward's uncle and 12 good soldiers in a border skirmish 2 years ago. Dane would consider this an act of theft. Matteo had seen it too. His face was ghost pale. "Your Majesty." Edward's mind raced through the implications. The treaty between Greymont and Shadowfen was fragile, a ceasefire held together by mutual exhaustion and the threat of other kingdoms taking advantage if they destroyed each other. One of the treaty's core tenets: neither kingdom would interfere with the other's bonded mates. "We need to return her," Matteo said quietly. "Immediately, before anyone knows she was here." Edward looked down at the woman in his arms. She'd stopped shaking quite so violently, but her eyes were still unfocused, her breathing shallow. There was something off about her beyond the near drowning. She was thin, and there were bruises on her arms that didn't look like they'd come from the river. Besides, she'd been on his side of the Corin River, in his territory. "How did she get here?" Edward said. Matteo glanced upstream. The current could have carried her from Shadowfen territory. If she fell in up near the border, she didn't fall. Edward's voice was absolute. He'd seen enough accidents to know the difference. The woman's eyes suddenly focused on him. They were blue, ocean blue, strikingly beautiful even in their terror, and filled with such raw fear that Edward's wolf surged forward protectively. "Please," she whispered, her voice wrecked. "Please don't send me back." Edward went very still. "What?" "I'd rather drown." Tears spilled down her cheeks, cutting tracks through the mud. "Please, I'd rather be dead." Matteo made a sound of distress. "My lady, you're confused." "I'm not confused." Her fingers clutched at Edward's shirt with surprising strength, her eyes locked on his. "Please, if you have any mercy at all, don't send me back to him." Edward stared at her, at the genuine terror in her expression, at the way she was looking at him like he held her entire fate in his hands. And he considered the choice in front of him. The smart choice, the only choice for a king who put his people first, was obvious. Carry her to the border, leave her where Dane's wolves would find her, walk away, avoid the war that would come if he kept what belonged to his enemy. But try as he might, he couldn't stop looking at her. He couldn't stop noticing the way her wet clothes clung to her curves, the way her breath came quick and shallow, the way her blue eyes searched his face like she was trying to read her future. His wolf was practically clawing at him from the inside. This wasn't just about helping someone in need. This was dangerous in an entirely different way. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Evelyn." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Evelyn Swan." "I'm Edward. I'm not going to let anyone hurt you." He said it before he could stop himself, before logic could intervene. "Do you understand? You're safe now." Her eyes widened for a moment, searching his face like she was looking for the lie. When she didn't find one, something in her expression cracked open, relief so profound it was almost painful to witness. Then she fell limp in his arms, unconscious again. "Your Majesty," Matteo's voice was urgent. "We need to decide. Now." Edward stood, lifting Evelyn easily. She weighed almost nothing, her body fragile against his chest. He could feel her heartbeat, fast and weak, but still fighting. "We're taking her to the castle," Edward said. "That's not negotiable." Edward started walking, his boots squelching in the mud. "Someone tried to kill her, Matteo. You want me to deliver her back to that?" "I want you to survive," Matteo said quietly. "I want Greymont to survive. Dane will call this a violation of the treaty. We'll deal with it." "And if dealing with it means war?" Edward looked down at the unconscious woman in his arms, at the bond mark that said she belonged to another man, at the delicate curve of her jaw, the way her dark lashes rested against pale cheeks, the slight part of her lips as she breathed. She wasn't his, could never be his. But his wolf didn't care. It wanted her with a ferocity that terrified him, wanted to keep her close and safe in a way that defied every law of their kind. His arms instinctively pulled her closer, and he felt the weight of what he was about to do settle over him like a sentence. "Then it means war," he said. By the time they reached the castle, Evelyn still hadn't woken. Edward carried her straight to the healer's wing, ignoring the shocked stares of his people. Whispers followed him through the corridors, but no one dared question their king directly. Mira, his head healer, took one look at the unconscious woman and moved into action. On the table. Now. Edward laid her down carefully. Mira's hands were already moving, checking pulse points, peeling back eyelids, pressing fingers to cold skin. How long was she under? I don't know. Minutes? She wasn't breathing when I pulled her out. Mira cursed under her breath. Her core temperature is dangerously low. She started stripping away the wet clothes, calling for blankets and heated stones. Then she froze, her eyes on the bond mark. Your Majesty. I know. Mira looked up at him, and in her weathered face he saw genuine fear. This will mean war. I know, he said again, but I couldn't leave her. Couldn't or wouldn't. Edward didn't answer. Couldn't, really, because he didn't understand it himself. Just that the moment he'd touched Evelyn, something had shifted in his chest. Something that felt like fate. Mira studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, but be careful, please. I always am, Mira. She snorted but turned back to her patient. Within minutes, Evelyn was wrapped in warm blankets, heating stones placed carefully around her body. Edward watched Mira work, unable to make himself leave. She'll need to stay here for observation, Mira said, at least overnight. And when she wakes up, she'll need answers about where she is, what happens next. I'll be here. You should rest. I'll be here, Edward repeated, his voice leaving no room for argument. Mira sighed but pulled up a chair for him. Stubborn as your father. Edward sat, his eyes never leaving Evelyn's face. Now asleep, some of her terror had smoothed away, but she still looked fragile, breakable. What happened to you? He wondered. What were you running from? Hours passed. The sun set, and Mira brought him food he barely touched. Matteo came by twice with reports. Scouts sent to watch the border, guards placed at every entrance, the council demanding an explanation Edward wasn't ready to give. Through it all, Edward sat beside Evelyn's bed and waited. It was well past midnight when her eyes finally opened. She stared at the ceiling for a long moment, disoriented. Then her gaze found Edward, sitting in the shadows beside her bed, and recognition flared. "You're real," she whispered. "I am. You didn't send me back." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. She turned her face away, her shoulders shaking, with silent sobs. Relief or grief or exhaustion, Edward couldn't tell. Probably all three. He wanted to comfort her, but didn't know if his touch would be welcome. So he just sat there, giving her space to fall apart. Finally, she turned back to him. "Why?" "Because you asked me not to." She let out a breath that was almost a soft laugh. "I didn't think you'd actually listen. I was really desperate, saying anything that might work." Her hands twisted together. "But keeping me here, you don't understand what Dane will do when he finds out." "Then help me understand." Edward leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "Tell me what happened, Evelyn. Why you'd rather drown than go back to your own mate." She was quiet for a long time, studying his face like she was trying to decide if she could trust him. And what a face it was. Strong jaw shadowed with stubble, sharp cheekbones, eyes that shifted between gray and green depending on the light. He was devastatingly handsome in that rough, masculine way that probably had women falling at his feet. All-controlled power and raw authority wrapped in golden skin and dark hair that fell just slightly too long. Evelyn felt the pull of him despite everything. That traitorous flutter low in her stomach, the awareness of how close he was standing, how his presence seemed to fill the entire room. She crushed it immediately. He was a king. She was bonded to his enemy. And even if neither of those things were true, even if she were free, men who looked like that, who carried power like a second skin, were exactly the type she'd learned to fear. Off-limits didn't even begin to cover it. "How much do you know about the sickness?" she asked finally, telling herself to focus. Edward frowned. "The fever? It's been spreading through the border villages for months. We've quarantined the affected areas, but it keeps moving." "It's not natural." Evelyn's voice was careful. "Dane is spreading it deliberately." The words hung in the air between them. "That's a serious accusation," Edward said slowly. "I know, but I can prove it." She pushed herself up to sitting, wincing slightly. "I've been Dane's mate for 2 years. She saw something like pain flicker across Edward's face. 2 years, he repeated. The way he said it made her chest tighten inexplicably, like she'd disappointed him somehow. "It was a political marriage," she added quickly, hating how defensive she sounded. "My father's lands sit on the border between Shadowfen and neutral territory, strategic location. Dane wanted control of the territory, so he made my father an offer. Food and protection in exchange for a marriage alliance. You agreed to this?" "I didn't have a choice, Edward. My father was dying, our people were starving, and Dane, he can be charming when he wants to be. At first, I thought maybe it could work. He was cold, calculating, but not cruel." She looked down at the bond mark on her wrist. But then the sickness started. Villages on both sides of the border, Shadowfen and Greymont, people dying by the dozens. Dane established quarantine camps, said he was trying to contain it. That's what we heard too. The camps aren't for quarantine. Evelyn's voice dropped to barely a whisper. They're labor sites. Dane is taking the sick, especially children, and using them in his silver mines. He's experimenting on them, trying to find ways to make them work longer before they die. And the sickness itself. She took a sharp breath. I found letters, correspondence with a blood mage. Dane commissioned a plague that would spread slowly, look natural, something to destabilize the border regions on both sides. Edward had gone very still. Why? But the way he asked it, quiet, almost resigned, made it clear he already knew the answer. He just needed to hear her say it. Dane is using this as an opportunity to offer protection, force more territories into alliances, and weaken Greymont's border defenses by making your people sick and desperate. She met his eyes. He's been planning an invasion. The sickness is just the first stage. Soften your borders, create chaos, then move in claiming he's bringing stability. You still have proof of this? I did. Documents, letters. I hid them in my father's estate before... She swallowed hard. Before Dane found out I knew. He's very good at reading people, at sensing when someone's lying. I must have given something away because one night he cornered me in his study, asked me what I'd been doing in his private chambers. What did you tell him? The truth. That I knew about the sickness, the camps, the children, that I'd found his correspondence. Evelyn's hands were shaking. He told me I had two choices: go along with his plans and keep my mouth shut, or have an unfortunate accident. I told him I'd rather die than help him hurt children. He said that could be arranged. Then he called for my brother. Your brother helped him? Yes. Dane had been grooming Callum for months. Gifts, promises of power, small tasks that gradually got darker. By the time I confronted Callum, he was in too deep to refuse orders. Her voice broke. Dane told him to take me to the northern bridge and make it look like an accident. Said if Callum refused, he'd kill us both. Your brother threw you into the river. His voice had gone dangerously soft, but his eyes blazed with a fury that made him look every inch the alpha predator he was. His hands had curled into fists at his sides, and Evelyn could see his jaw working like he was physically restraining himself from violence. The documents you hid, Edward said, his voice carefully controlled. Where are they? My father's estate, in the Eastern Holdings. There's a loose stone in the library fireplace, second from the bottom on the left side. Everything's hidden there. How detailed are they? Names, dates, correspondence with the blood mage, ledgers showing payments, maps of the mine locations and the camps. She paused. Enough to prove what he's doing. Enough to get the other kingdoms to turn against him. Edward turned back to face her. If we can retrieve those documents, present them to the High Council of the Five Kingdoms. Dane would be tried for war crimes, Evelyn finished. His allies would abandon him. She met Edward's eyes. But getting those documents means going into Shadowfen territory, into my father's estate, which Dane now controls. It's a trap waiting to happen. Let me worry about that. Edward, you don't understand. Dane knows I'm alive. She touched the bond mark. He can feel me through this. Weak, distant, but alive. He'll know someone pulled me from the river. And when he figures out I'm in Greymont, then we need to move fast. Edward moved back to her bedside. Can you draw me a map of your father's estate? Show me exactly where the documents are hidden. You're actually going to do this. Did you think I wouldn't? Evelyn stared at him. Most kings would have sent me back by now, chosen political stability over— She gestured helplessly between them. Over whatever this is. I'm not most kings. Edward sat on the edge of the bed, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, close enough that his scent of pine and winter air made her head spin. And you were right to be afraid, Evelyn. What Dane is doing, it's monstrous. If there's evidence that can stop him, we have to try. The way he said her name, low and rough, like it meant something, sent heat coursing through her veins. Even if it means war? Even then. His eyes held hers. But I need to know. Are you sure about this? Once we move against Dane, there's no going back. He'll come after you with everything he has. I'm already dead as far as he's concerned, Evelyn said. At least this way. My death will mean something. You're not going to die. The intensity in Edward's voice made her breath catch. I won't let that happen. You can't promise that. Watch me. Evelyn's heart was doing something erratic in her chest, but she couldn't look away from him, from the storm in his eyes, from the set of his jaw that said he meant every word. She'd spent 2 years learning to make herself small, to measure her words, to anticipate violence. Dane had taught her that protection always came with a price, that nothing was given freely. But Edward was looking at her like she was something precious, not because of her father's lands or political advantage, but because— She didn't let herself finish that thought. You barely know me, she whispered. His gaze dropped briefly to her mouth before meeting her eyes again. I know enough. The air between them felt impossibly thin. Evelyn was acutely aware of every inch of distance separating them, of how easy it would be to lean forward, to test whether this pull she felt was mutual or just her own desperate loneliness manifesting as something it wasn't. Why are you really doing this? She asked softly. The truth. Edward was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough yet intimate. Because when I pulled you from the river, something in me recognized you. I don't know what it means or why it happened, but the moment I touched you, it felt like— He leaned closer, and his eyes held hers captive. Like you were always supposed to end up here, in my territory, under my protection. His voice dropped lower now, almost a growl. Mine to keep safe. The possessiveness in that word, mine, should have terrified her. Instead, it sent liquid heat pooling in her stomach. And when you begged me not to send you back, he continued, every instinct I have roared at me to keep you, to hide you away where Dane could never touch you again, to make sure no one ever put fear in your eyes again. His jaw tightened. So no, Evelyn, I'm not doing this just to defeat an enemy. I'm doing this because the thought of you going back to him makes me want to burn Shadowfen to the ground. Evelyn's heart stuttered. That's insane. Probably. His gaze traced over her face like he was memorizing it. But I stopped pretending to be rational the moment I pulled you out of the river. You don't even know me. I know you were brave enough to stand up to a monster. I know you'd rather die than see children hurt. I know you're terrified but still fighting. His hand moved, hesitated, then gently covered hers. His touch sent electricity racing up Evelyn's arm. She had to remind herself yet again that getting involved with him would only make everything more complicated. I'm bound to him, Edward, she whispered. The mark, it can't be broken except by death. So whatever this is between us, it can't go anywhere. I'm legally Dane's mate, and even if we survive what's coming, I'll always carry his mark. Edward's jaw tightened. I don't care about the mark. You should. It means Dane forced a bond on— You without your consent. It doesn't mean you belong to him." Edward's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. "And if we can prove what he's done, if we can bring him down, there are ways to break forced bonds. Blood mages who specialize in undoing what others have done. That's illegal in most kingdoms. So is creating plagues and enslaving children." His eyes held hers. "If we're already breaking one set of rules, might as well break them all." His lips curved into a faint boyish smile. Despite everything, the danger, the impossibility of their situation, Evelyn felt a laugh bubble up. "You're actually serious." "Completely." She studied his face carefully. She saw hardened determination, but also something softer, something that made her chest ache with the dark irony of it all, that she'd finally met someone who looked at her like this, yet she was bound to a monster who wanted her dead. "Okay, I'll draw you the map," she said finally. "I'll tell you everything I know about the estate's defenses. But Edward," she squeezed his hand, "promise me you'll be careful. Dane doesn't fight fair, and he doesn't leave witnesses. I promise." Edward stood but didn't release her hand immediately. "Rest for now. We'll plan first thing tomorrow." "Wait." Evelyn's fingers tightened on his. Could you stay? Just for a little while? I don't want to be alone right now." Something in Edward's expression softened. "Of course." He pulled the chair closer and sat, his hand still holding hers. Evelyn closed her eyes, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, and for the first time in 2 years, she felt something like safety. Dane Ashland received the news at dawn. His lead tracker burst into his chambers without knocking, a breach of protocol that would normally mean death, but the man's face was pale with genuine fear. "Your Majesty, Lady Evelyn, I know she's alive." Dane's voice was cold as winter. He touched the bond mark on his wrist. "I can feel her, weak but alive, which means someone pulled her from the river." "Your Majesty, our scouts found evidence at the northern bridge. There were tracks, multiple people, horses. They led across the border into Greymont territory." Dane went very still. "Edward Kane has her." "We believe so, Your Majesty." A slow smile spread across Dane's face. "That's perfect." The tracker blinked, dumbfounded. "Your Majesty? Don't you see? Edward has just handed me everything I needed." Dane stood, moving to the window where dawn light was breaking over his kingdom. "I've been looking for an excuse to move against Greymont for years. The treaty tied my hands. I couldn't attack without justification. But now?" He turned back to his tracker. "Now Edward has violated the most sacred tenet of our agreement. He's harboring my bonded mate on his soil. I'm within my rights to demand her return and to take military action if he refuses." "He might give her back." "He won't." Dane's smile widened. "I know Edward Kane. He's idealistic, thinks honor means something. If Evelyn told him about the mines, the sickness, and knowing her she did, he'll see himself as her protector. He'll refuse to hand her over, and when he does, I'll have my war. The other kingdoms may not support. They will when I present it correctly. Edward stole a bonded mate. That's a violation of sacred law, older than any treaty. The High Council will have to side with me or admit that bond marks mean nothing." Dane moved to his desk, already composing messages in his mind. "Send riders to each of the 5 kingdoms. Tell them Edward Kane has committed an act of theft against Shadowfen, that I'm demanding her return and will take military action if he refuses. Make sure they understand this is about upholding the sanctity of mate bonds. What if Edward returns her? He won't, but if he does..." Dane's expression went cold. Then Evelyn dies the moment she crosses the border, and I'll find another reason for war. Either way, Edward will fall." The tracker bowed and fled. Dane stood at the window, his mind already racing through battle strategies and political maneuvers. Everything was falling into place. The sickness had weakened Greymont's borders. His spies had mapped their defenses, and now he had the perfect justification to invade. Evelyn had always been too clever for her own good, but her attempt to escape had just sealed Greymont's fate. And when this was over, when Edward Kane's head was on a spike and Greymont's lands were absorbed into Shadowfen, Dane would find Evelyn and show her exactly what happened to people who tried to betray him. Death would be a mercy. For Evelyn, the next 3 days passed in a blur. She recovered her strength slowly, spending hours with Edward and Matteo planning the mission to retrieve the documents. She drew detailed maps of her father's estate, marked guard positions, explained patrol schedules, and, through it all, she was achingly aware of Edward's presence. He came to see her every morning before his council meetings and every evening after training, brought her books from his library, food from the kitchens, sat with her while she ate and asked about her life before Dane. Not about the horror of her marriage, but about who she'd been as a child, her favorite memories, the dreams she'd had before they were taken away. It felt like he was trying to remind her that she was more than what had been done to her, that she existed beyond her trauma, and Evelyn found herself falling. It was impossible and foolish and completely inadvisable, but the way Edward looked at her made her heart do stupid, reckless things. On the 4th morning, when Edward came to her room carrying fresh bread and honey, Evelyn caught his wrist. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for seeing me as more than just a problem to solve." Edward set down the tray and sat on the edge of her bed. "You were never a problem, Evelyn. I'm the mate of your enemy. I'm a political disaster waiting to happen. You're a woman who was brave enough to stand against evil, even when it meant risking everything." His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "You're extraordinary." The touch made her breath catch. She'd spent 2 years starving for gentle touch, for someone to look at her with warmth instead of calculation. "Edward." Her voice came out barely a whisper. "Tell me to stop," he said softly. "Tell me this isn't what you want, and I'll walk away. But Evelyn..." His eyes searched hers. "I can't pretend I don't feel this." "I feel it too," she admitted. "But I don't know if it's real or just gratitude because you saved me." "Then let's find out." Edward leaned closer, giving her every opportunity to pull away. "Let me kiss you, and if it feels wrong, we'll know. I'll stop." Evelyn's heart raced against her ribs. This was insanely dangerous, uncharted territory, but she found herself closing the distance between them anyway, her lips meeting his. For a heartbeat, Edward went still, shocked or restraining himself, she couldn't tell. Then his control shattered, his hand fisted in her hair, angling her head as he kissed her back with a desperation that stole her breath. It wasn't gentle or sweet. It was raw need, days of wanting compressed into a single moment. Evelyn made a sound against his mouth, half gasp, half surrender, and caught his bottom lip between her teeth. Not hard, just enough to make him groan. She felt him shudder, his other hand finding her waist and pulling her closer, the heat of him burning through the thin fabric of her dress. This wasn't gratitude. This was hunger, sharp and consuming. When they finally broke apart, both gasping for air, Edward's pupils were blown wide, his breathing ragged. His thumb traced her swollen bottom lip. "Still think it's just gratitude?" he asked, his voice rough. "No," Evelyn breathed. "Definitely not just that." He smiled, a real smile, warm and devastating, and kissed her again. Softer this time, tender in a way that made her heart long for more. "We're terrible at self-preservation," she murmured against his mouth. "Completely awful at it." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "But Evelyn, I need you to know this isn't just about attraction. You make me feel like myself, not just a king making impossible choices, but a man who's allowed to want something for himself." His thumb brushed her cheekbone, and she saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the fear that he was saying too much, that she might not feel the same weight of this thing between them. "The timing is terrible," he continued quietly, "and the situation is a nightmare. But I can't regret you, Evelyn. I won't. Even if this ends badly, I'd rather have this moment with you than a lifetime of safety without it." Evelyn's throat tightened. She pulled back slightly, just enough to see his face, clearly. "Are you sure?" She held up her wrist, where Dane's mark still burned dark against her skin. "I'll always be tainted by this." "You're not tainted." "I am." Her voice cracked. "In the eyes of every kingdom, every law that matters. You're king, Edward. You deserve someone who comes to you freely, not someone who's already claimed, someone whose bond you don't have to break through blood magic and forbidden rituals, someone who doesn't come with a target on her back and a mark she can't erase." Edward's hand came up to cradle her face. "That's not a bond, Evelyn. It's a brand, a scar, and scars don't define who you are." His eyes held hers, fierce and unwavering. "You say I deserve someone who comes to me freely? That's exactly what I have. Every day you choose to keep going despite everything that's been done to you." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, catching a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "And when we break that mark, I want to court you properly. I want to give you the choice you never had. To choose me not because I saved you, but because you want me. Just me. The way I want you." Evelyn's breath caught. "Even with everything that comes with me. Especially with everything that comes with you." He leaned his forehead against hers. "You're worth it, Evelyn. And one day, I hope you see yourself the way I see you." She kissed him then, softer this time, but no less intense. A kiss that tasted like hope and promises, and the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, they could have this. The moment was shattered by a sharp knock on the door. Matteo's voice came through, urgent. "Your Majesty, we have a problem." Edward stood reluctantly, his hand lingering on Evelyn's for a moment before he moved to the door. "What is it?" Matteo's face was grim. "Dane has made a formal demand for Evelyn's return. He sent letters to all 5 kingdoms, claiming you violated the treaty by harboring his mate. The High Council is calling an emergency session in 3 days to hear his petition." Edward's expression went cold. "Let him petition. We're not giving her back." "Your Majesty, if you refuse, it's war. The other kingdoms will be forced to choose sides. Then they choose. But Evelyn stays here, under my protection." Matteo glanced past Edward to where Evelyn sat frozen in the bed. "My lady, I'm sorry, but you should know, Dane has also put a bounty on your head, dead or alive. Every mercenary and assassin in 5 kingdoms will be looking for you." The blood drained from Evelyn's face. "How much?" 10,000 gold pieces. Edward swore viciously. "Double the guard on this wing. No one gets in or out without my personal approval." "Already done, Your Majesty." Matteo hesitated. "There's one more thing. Our scouts report that Dane is moving troops toward the border. Not a full invasion force yet, but enough to look threatening. He's positioning for war whether the council rules in his favor or not. Then we need those documents." Edward turned back to Evelyn. "How soon can we move?" "Tonight," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "The estate is 3 hours' ride from here. If we go tonight, we can be in and out before Dane realizes what we're doing." "You're not coming," Edward said protectively. "Yes, I am. It's my father's estate. I know every entrance, every guard schedule, every hiding place. You need me." "It's too dangerous." "Everything is dangerous now, Edward." Evelyn stood, crossing to him. "Please, I need to do this. I need to be part of stopping him." Their eyes met, and she saw the war playing out in his expression, the desire to protect her warring with respect for her agency. Matteo looked between them. "I'll assemble a team, small, fast, quiet. We leave at midnight." They rode through the darkness, 10 riders moving like ghosts through the forest. Evelyn sat in front of Edward on his horse, his arms bracketing her, his presence a solid warmth at her back. She should be terrified, but having him close made it bearable. The estate appeared through the trees just after 3 in the morning, dark and silent, no lights visible except the torches by the main gate. "2 guards at the entrance," Matteo whispered. "More on patrol. Do we take them quietly or avoid them?" "Avoid," Edward said. "The fewer people who know we were here, the better." He looked down at Evelyn. "The servants' entrance?" "Around back. There's a door that leads to the kitchens. It's usually unlocked. The cook likes to step out for a smoke." They circled the estate, leaving the horses with 2 of Edward's men. The servants' door was indeed unlocked, and they slipped inside like shadows. The kitchens were empty, dark. Evelyn led them through familiar corridors, her heart pounding. She'd grown up in this house, had run through these halls as a child, sat in the library while her father read to her, and now it was enemy territory. The library was on the 2nd floor. They climbed the servants' staircase, avoiding the main halls where guards might patrol. At the library door, Evelyn paused, listening. She pushed it open carefully. Moonlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating rows of books and her father's old desk. Evelyn crossed to the fireplace, dropping to her knees. 2nd stone from the bottom, left side. Her fingers found the edges, prying at the loose stone. It wouldn't budge. "Edward," she whispered. "It's stuck." He knelt beside her, adding his strength to hers. The stone finally shifted, revealing a hollow space behind it, but it was empty. Evelyn's blood went cold. "No, no, no!" "Looking for these," a familiar voice said from the doorway. Evelyn spun around. Callum stood in the entrance, a stack of documents in his hands. Behind him, a dozen armed guards filed into the room, surrounding them. Edward's hand went to his sword, but Matteo grabbed his arm. They were outnumbered, trapped. Callum's expression was hollow as he looked at his sister. "I'm sorry, Evie, but Dane knew you'd come for these. He's been waiting." "Callum," Evelyn breathed. "You threw me off a bridge and it still wasn't enough? You have to deliver me to him personally?" "I don't have a choice." But Callum's voice cracked. "He has Mother's necklace, the one Father gave her before she died. He said if I didn't help trap you, he'd destroy it. Said he'd burn every memory of her until there was nothing left." "She's dead, Callum. A necklace doesn't bring her back." "It's all I have left of her. He's taken everything else, every good memory, every piece of who I used to be. That necklace is the only thing that still feels pure." "So you traded your sister's life for a piece of jewelry," Edward said, his voice cold. Callum flinched. "You don't understand what it's like, living under his control, what he makes you do, the things he takes from you. I understand that you're a coward." Edward's hand was still on his sword hilt, measuring distances. "Callum, please." Evelyn took a step toward her brother. "It's not too late. Give us the documents. Help us stop him. We can protect you." "No one can protect me from Dane." Callum's laugh was bitter. "He's in my head, Evie. Every thought, every breath. The bond mark makes sure of that." Evelyn froze. "What? You think you're the only one he forced a bond on?" Callum pulled up his sleeve, revealing an identical crescent moon over crossed blades on his wrist. "He did it 6 months ago, said it would ensure my loyalty, and it does. I can feel him right now, demanding obedience, promising pain if I fail." Horror washed through Evelyn. She'd known Dane was controlling Callum, but this, forcing a mate bond on her brother, was a violation beyond anything she'd imagined. "The guards," Edward said quietly to Matteo. "Can we take them?" "Not without casualties, and they'll alert the entire estate." "Then we need a different strategy." Edward raised his voice. "Callum, you said, Dane is in your head. Can he hear us right now?" "No, the bond doesn't work like that. It's more feelings than thoughts, but he'll know if I disobey." "What if you didn't disobey?" Edward's mind was racing. "What if you did exactly what he asked, delivered us to him, let him think he'd won, but you gave us a chance to escape?" "He'd kill me." "Is this really the life you want, Callum?" Evelyn said softly. "Following orders, betraying everyone you love until there's nothing left of who you were?" Callum's face crumpled. "I don't know how to stop." "You start by choosing." Evelyn held out her hand. "Right now. Give us the documents and let us leave. It's that simple." "It's not simple." "It is." Edward's voice was firm. "You make a choice, Callum, right now. Save your sister or serve the man who's already destroyed you. There's no middle ground." Callum looked at the documents in his hands, then at the guards surrounding them, then at his sister, standing defiant despite the fear in her eyes, and something in him broke. "I'm so sorry, Evie," he whispered, then louder, "Guards, seize them." But as the guards moved forward, Callum threw the documents to Evelyn and drew his own sword, placing himself between his sister and Dane's men. "Run!" he shouted. "The servants' passage behind the bookshelf. It leads to the stables. Run!" Edward grabbed Evelyn's hand, pulling her toward the bookshelf Callum had indicated. Matteo and the other warriors formed a barrier, buying them time. "Callum, no." Evelyn tried to turn back, but Edward's grip was iron. "He made his choice," Edward said. "Don't waste it." They crashed through the hidden passage, the sound of fighting erupting behind them. The passage was narrow, dark, but Evelyn knew it by feel, had played in these walls as a child. Behind them, she heard Callum scream. "Keep moving," Edward commanded, but his voice was gentle. "We have to keep moving." They burst into the stables. Edward whistled sharply, and his horse appeared, already saddled. He lifted Evelyn onto the saddle and swung up behind her, kicking the horse into a gallop before she could protest. Behind them, shouts rose. Torches flared to life, but they were already gone, racing through the darkness with the documents clutched against Evelyn's chest and her brother's sacrifice echoing in her ears. They rode hard for an hour before Edward finally slowed, checking behind them for pursuit. Nothing. Either they'd lost Dane's men entirely, or Callum had bought them enough time to escape cleanly. Evelyn was shaking, silent tears streaming down her face. Edward pulled the horse to a stop in a small clearing. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, unable to speak. He dismounted and lifted her down, pulling her into his arms. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry about your brother." He saved us. Evelyn's voice broke. After everything, he saved us. He redeemed himself. That's what mattered in the end. They stood there in the darkness, holding each other while Evelyn fell apart. Edward didn't try to fix it, didn't offer empty platitudes. He just held her, steady and warm, letting her grieve. Finally, she pulled back, wiping her eyes. We should go. Dane will be hunting us. We have time, and you need a moment to breathe. I don't deserve. Yes, you do. Edward cupped her face, his eyes fierce. You deserve time to grieve, Evelyn. You deserve to fall apart. Your brother just died saving you. You're allowed to feel that. If I fall apart now, I won't be able to put myself back together. Then I'll help you. He kissed her forehead. You don't have to be strong alone anymore. The words broke something in her. Evelyn buried her face in his chest and let herself cry. For Callum, for her father, for the life she'd lost, and the impossible situation they were in. And through it all, Edward held her. Steady as stone, warm as summer, anchoring her when she felt like she might fly apart. When the storm finally passed, Evelyn pulled back, exhausted but steadier. Thank you. Always. Edward brushed a strand of hair from her face. Ready to finish this? She nodded, clutching the documents. Let's end him. They reached Greymont Castle by dawn. The High Council session was in 2 days. Barely enough time to prepare, but it would have to be enough. Evelyn spent the next 48 hours with Edward's advisors, going through every document, preparing testimony, building an irrefutable case against Dane. The evidence was ironclad. Letters proving Dane had commissioned the plague, ledgers showing payments to the Blood Mage, maps of the mine locations with detailed notes about mortality rates and acceptable losses, correspondence between Dane and corrupt officials in 3 kingdoms, coordinating the spread of the sickness. It was everything they needed. On the morning of the council session, Edward came to Evelyn's room. She was dressed in borrowed finery, deep blue silk that made her eyes luminous, but her hands were shaking as she tried to fasten a necklace. Let me, Edward said softly, taking the clasp from her fingers. His hands were steady as he fastened it, his fingers lingering on her neck for a moment longer than necessary. I'm scared, Evelyn admitted. I know. Edward turned her to face him. But you don't have to do this alone. I'll be right there with you. Dane's going to be in that room. I'll have to see him again. And he'll see you, alive and well, about to destroy everything he built. Edward's eyes held hers. You're stronger than him, Evelyn. You always have been. That's why he tried to kill you. She took a shaky breath. What if the council doesn't believe us? They will. The evidence is irrefutable. Even if they rule against Dane, he won't accept it. He'll fight. Let him. Edward's voice was hard. I'm ready. Evelyn reached up, cupping his face. I don't want you to die for me, Edward. I'm not dying. Neither of us are. He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. We're going to walk into that council chamber, present the truth, and watch Dane's empire crumble. And then, his voice softened. Then, we're going to find a way to break your bond, and I'm going to court you properly, the way you deserve. The High Council chamber was vast, designed to accommodate representatives from all 5 kingdoms. Evelyn had never been inside before, had only heard stories about the carved pillars and the ancient throne where the High Arbiter sat. Now, standing in the center with Edward at her side, she felt impossibly small. The representatives sat in a semicircle, 5 kingdoms, 3 delegates each, and in the front row, lounging like he owned the place, was Dane. He looked exactly as she remembered. Handsome in a cold, sharp way, with ice-blue eyes and hair the color of winter wheat. He wore formal armor polished to a mirror shine, and when his gaze found Evelyn, he smiled. It was the smile of a predator that had just spotted prey. The High Arbiter, an elderly woman with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing, struck her staff against the floor. We convene to hear the petition of Alpha King Dane Ashland of Shadowfen against Alpha King Edward Kane of Greymont. King Dane, present your case. Dane stood, moving with languid grace. Honored Arbiter, esteemed counsel, I come before you with a grievance against King Edward. 3 weeks ago, my bonded mate, Evelyn Swan, disappeared from Shadowfen territory. I have evidence that she now resides in Greymont Castle, held against her will by King Edward. Lies, Edward said quietly, but the word carried through the chamber. The bond mark does not lie. Dane held up his wrist, showing the crescent moon over crossed blades. I can feel her, even now, in this very room. His eyes found Evelyn. Hello, darling. Did you miss me? Evelyn's stomach churned, but she held his gaze. I didn't disappear. You ordered my brother to murder me. Gasps rippled through the council. Dane's smile didn't waver. My dear, you're clearly confused. Perhaps the trauma of your accident. It wasn't an accident. You told Callum to throw me off the northern bridge because I discovered what you've been doing. Evelyn's voice grew stronger. The plague you commissioned, the children you're enslaving, the mines where you work people to death. That's quite an accusation. Dane's tone was amused. We have proof. Edward stepped forward, holding up the documents. Letters, ledgers, correspondence, everything you've been hiding. For the first time, something flickered in Dane's expression. Not fear, but focused calculation. I see you've been busy, darling. He looked at the High Arbiter. Whatever documents King Edward claims to have, they're clearly forgeries, created to justify his violation of the treaty. We can verify their authenticity, the Arbiter said. Present them. The next hour was excruciating. Evelyn and Edward laid out the evidence piece by piece. The letters with Dane's seal, the Blood Mage's correspondence, the ledgers in Dane's own hand. With each revelation, the council grew quieter, more horrified. Finally, the Arbiter held up a hand. Enough. King Dane, how do you answer these accusations? Dane had gone very still. When he spoke, his voice was ice. I answer that this entire proceeding is a farce. King Edward has clearly manipulated my mate into fabricating evidence against me. He's violated the treaty by harboring her, and now he's trying to justify his actions by destroying my reputation. The evidence isn't fabricated, Evelyn said, and I'm not being manipulated. I'm here voluntarily because Edward saved my life when you tried to take it. You're confused, darling, traumatized. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. Evelyn stepped forward, her voice ringing through the chamber. You forced a bond on me 2 years ago. You controlled me, used me, and when I discovered your crimes, you ordered my death. You're a monster, Dane, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure everyone knows it. Dane's mask finally cracked. The pleasant smile vanished, replaced by cold fury. You ungrateful... Enough. The Arbiter's voice cut through the tension. This council has heard sufficient evidence. King Dane, you are hereby charged with war crimes, use of forbidden blood magic, and attempted murder. Your lands are forfeit, your title revoked. You will be held for trial. Dane's hand moved to his belt, a motion so casual the guards didn't register it as a threat until the blade was already free. Not his ceremonial sword, but something smaller, concealed. A knife with a slim blade that caught the light as he moved. He lunged not for the arbiter or Edward, but for Evelyn. His eyes locked on hers as he moved, and she saw the message written in that single look. If I fall, you fall with me. The blade arced toward Evelyn's chest, toward her heart, and time seemed to slow. Edward moved like lightning, his body slamming into Dane's with enough force to change the trajectory of the blade, but not enough to stop it completely. The knife that had been aimed at Evelyn's heart buried itself in Edward's shoulder instead, punching through muscle and scraping bone. The sound Edward made, a sharp, involuntary grunt of pain, would haunt Evelyn's dreams for months. They went down together, Edward and Dane, crashing into the stone floor in a tangle of limbs. Guards were shouting, rushing forward, but everything felt distant to Evelyn, muffled, like she was underwater again, drowning. Edward rolled off Dane, his hand going to his shoulder where the blade still protruded, blood already soaking through his formal leathers. His face was pale, but his jaw was set, his eyes finding Evelyn's immediately. "I'm fine," he gritted out, but he swayed when he tried to stand. Dane was laughing as the guards hauled him to his feet, the sound manic and unhinged. "You think this changes anything? You think you've won?" His eyes were wild, fixed on Evelyn. "I should have killed you myself, should have put my hands around your throat and watched the light leave your eyes. That was my mistake, trusting your pathetic brother to finish the job." "Enough!" The arbiter's voice cracked like a whip. "Remove him now!" But Dane wasn't done. He fought against the guard's grip, still screaming as they dragged him toward the doors. "This isn't over, Evelyn. You hear me? You're mine. That mark makes you mine. And when I get free, I'll make you wish Callum had succeeded. I'll make you beg for the river." His voice echoed through the chamber even after the doors slammed shut behind him, his words hanging in the air like poison. Evelyn rushed forward. "Edward." Her voice came out strangled. "I'm fine," he said again, but his knees buckled. Evelyn was at his side before he hit the ground, catching him, her hands immediately going to the wound. The blade was still embedded in his shoulder, and she knew enough not to remove it. That would only make the bleeding worse. "Get the healers," she screamed at the stunned council members. "Someone get the healers now." Edward's hand found hers, slick with blood. "Evelyn, listen. Don't." Tears were streaming down her face. "Don't you dare try to say goodbye. You're going to be fine. The healers are coming and you're going to be fine." "Not saying goodbye." His smile was weak, pain etched into every line of his face. "Just needed you to know. You're worth it." Then his eyes closed. The healers burst through the doors, Mira at the front, her face pale when she saw the blade. Evelyn stepped back, her hands shaking, covered in Edward's blood. She watched as Mira assessed the wound, as other healers swarmed around with supplies, as they carefully, so carefully, began to remove the blade. Then the healers were lifting him, rushing him from the chamber, and all Evelyn could do was follow, his blood still warm on her hands, Dane's threats still ringing in her ears. The first thing Edward saw was Evelyn, asleep in a chair beside his bed, her hand holding his. She looked exhausted, her hair loose and tangled, dark circles under her eyes. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "Evelyn," he said, his voice rough. Her eyes flew open. "Edward." She was on her feet instantly, her hands on his face, his chest, checking that he was real. "You're awake. Thank God you're awake." "How long has it been?" 3 days. The wound got infected. They said you almost died twice." Her voice broke. "You scared me." "Sorry." He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "But I'm stubborn. wasn't going to leave you. Evelyn's composure cracked. I sat here watching you fight infection, watching you slip away, and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't save you the way you saved me. You did save me. Edward's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. Every time I started to slip, I could feel you pulling me back. That's not... She shook her head, tears spilling over. Edward, I need to tell you something. Before you passed out, you said... She swallowed hard. You said it was worth it, that I was worth it. And I wanted to tell you then, but you were bleeding and I was so scared, so I didn't get the chance. Tell me what? That I love you. The words came out in a rush, raw and desperate. I love you, Edward. So much it terrifies me. So much that watching you lie here unconscious for 3 days felt like drowning all over again. He pulled her down and kissed her, cutting off her words. It was gentle despite the desperation behind it, his hand cradling the back of her head like she was something infinitely precious. I love you too, he said, his voice rough with emotion. In case that wasn't clear, I love you, Evelyn, and I'd take 1,000 knives if it meant keeping you safe. That's not romantic, that's terrifying. Can it be both? The boyish smile returned, lighting up his face. She laughed through her tears and kissed him again, softer this time. Don't ever scare me like that again. I'll try my best. So what happened? He asked. After I went down? The council ruled against Dane, stripped his title, seized his lands. He's being held in the dungeons, awaiting trial. Evelyn's expression darkened. His allies are scrambling to distance themselves. The kingdoms he'd corrupted are being investigated. It's chaos, but the right kind. And how are you? Safe, protected, waiting for you to wake up so I could tell you the council. They've agreed to help break the forced bond. There's a blood mage in the Eastern Kingdom who specializes in undoing coerced magic. She says it's possible, but it will be painful. Do it. Edward didn't hesitate. Whatever it takes to free you from him. It might take months. I don't care. He pulled her closer. However long it takes, I'll wait. And when you're free, when that mark is gone, and you're truly yours again, I'm going to ask you properly. Ask me what? To bond with me. Not because of politics or treaties or force, but because you choose it, because you want me as much as I want you. She kissed him again, softer this time. I won't need months to know my answer, Edward. I already know. Yeah? Yeah. She smiled against his mouth. But I'll let you court me properly anyway. You promised, after all. I did. Edward's hand slid into her hair, holding her close. I'll court you so thoroughly you'll get sick of me. Impossible. We'll see. They stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other, breathing together. Outside, the world was still recovering from Dane's fall. There would be trials, investigations, political fallout. The process of breaking the forced bond would be long and painful. But for now, in this quiet moment, they had each other. 6 months later, the bond mark on Evelyn's wrist finally faded. It happened on a crisp, autumn morning, in the presence of the Eastern Kingdom's blood mage. The ritual had taken months. Slow, careful work to undo what Dane's mage had forced into place. And it had been agonizing, just as promised. Days where Evelyn could barely move, nights where the pain was so intense she'd screamed until her voice gave out. Edward had been there through all of it, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, refusing to leave even when the healers suggested he rest. And now, finally, it was done. Evelyn stared at her wrist where the crescent moon over crossed blades had been. The skin was smooth, unmarked, free. How do you feel? The blood mage asked. Light. Evelyn flexed her fingers. Like I've been carrying a weight I didn't realize was there until it was gone. Edward caught her hand, examining the unmarked skin with wonder. It's really gone. Evelyn looked up at him, tears in her eyes. I'm free, Edward. Finally free. You were always free, he said softly. But I'm glad the mark is gone too. They thanked the blood mage and made their way back through the castle. It was strange, Evelyn thought, how much had changed in 6 months. Dane was imprisoned, awaiting execution after his trial concluded with a unanimous guilty verdict. His kingdom had been divided among the other rulers, his forces disbanded. The plague had been stopped, the mines shut down, the children rescued and returned to their families. And Evelyn had found a home in Greymont, not just in the castle, but in the people. They'd welcomed her, accepted her, made her feel like she belonged. But more than anything, she'd found home in Edward. He'd courted her exactly as promised, with flowers and poetry, long walks through the gardens, quiet evenings in the library. He'd introduced her to his council, sought her opinion on governance, treated her like an equal in every way that mattered. And he'd waited, patient and steady, giving her time to heal, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. Now, as they walked through the castle corridors, Evelyn realized she didn't want to wait anymore. Edward, she said, stopping in the middle of the hallway. She took a deep breath. You said you'd ask me properly, when the mark was gone. I'm ready. Ask me. Understanding dawned in Edward's eyes. Here? Now? He smiled, that warm, devastating smile that still made her heart stutter, and dropped to one knee. Evelyn Swan, he said, his voice steady and sure. You are the bravest, strongest, most extraordinary person I've ever known. You survived a monster, saved countless lives, and somehow still have room in your heart for kindness. I love you more than I have words for, and I would be honored, more honored than I deserve, if you would bond with me, not because of politics or obligation, but because you choose it, because you choose me. Evelyn's vision blurred with tears. Yes, yes, of course, yes. Edward stood and kissed her, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. When he set her down, both of them were laughing, giddy with joy and relief and the beautiful impossibility of having survived everything to find each other. When? He asked, his forehead pressed to hers. Soon. I don't want to wait anymore. Neither do I. They bonded under the full moon 3 weeks later, with the entire court as witnesses. Evelyn wore deep blue silk that made her eyes glow, and Edward wore formal leathers marked with his family crest. When they spoke their vows, promising partnership and choice and love freely given, Evelyn felt the bond form. Not like Dane's forced mark, all pain and control. This was warmth, connection, a bridge between two people who'd chosen each other completely. When Edward kissed her, sealing the bond, Evelyn felt something shift in her chest, a rightness, like puzzle pieces clicking into place. I love you, she whispered against his mouth. I love you, he said back, for the rest of our lives. The celebration lasted until dawn. There was music and dancing and toasts that grew increasingly ridiculous as the wine flowed. But eventually, Edward and Evelyn slipped away to their chambers, the rooms that were officially theirs now. Edward loved her with a reverence that made her tremble, his hands mapping every curve like he was memorizing her, his mouth trailing fire across her skin. There was hunger in his touch, but also something deeper, like he was trying to erase every moment Dane had made her feel like she was nothing more than a possession. You're so beautiful, he murmured against her throat, and the way he said it, raw and wondering, made her believe it for the first time in years. Evelyn pulled him closer, her fingers threading through his hair as she kissed him with everything she had, all the fear and relief and desperate love that had been building for months. When he finally moved above her, his eyes never left hers, holding her gaze like she was the only thing that mattered in the world. It was nothing like the cold, calculated intimacy she'd known with Dane. This was warmth and choice, and two people choosing each other completely. Every touch was a promise. Every kiss was a claim she wanted to make. And when they finally came together, moving as one in the moonlight, Evelyn felt something inside her heal. A piece of herself she thought Dane had destroyed, coming back to life in Edward's arms. Afterward, they lay tangled together, both breathless and trembling, her head resting over his heart. "I used to dream about running away," Evelyn whispered, "starting over somewhere no one knew me, being invisible. What about now? Now I'm exactly where I want to be, seen, known, loved." She tilted her head to look at him. "You gave me freedom, and I used it to choose you." Edward's expression softened. "Best choice you ever made." "Second best," she corrected. "The first was surviving long enough to find you." He laughed and pulled her closer. "Fair point." They fell into comfortable silence. Outside, the celebration continued, muted by distance but still audible. The pack was happy for them. Greymont was thriving, recovering from the damage Dane's plague had caused. "I've been thinking about Callum," she said quietly, her fingers tracing idle patterns on Edward's chest. "Is that terrible? That I'm thinking about him now?" Edward's hand stilled in her hair. "No, I understand. I'm still angry at him." Her voice cracked. "For pushing me off that bridge, for choosing Dane over me, even if it was out of fear. But I also—" She swallowed hard. "He died saving us. He made a choice at the end. And I don't know how to hold both of those things at once. The betrayal and the sacrifice." "You don't have to choose," Edward said gently. "People are complicated. What he did to you was unforgivable, and what he did at the end was brave. Both things can be true." "I wish I could have told him I forgave him, or that I understood at least." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "He was my brother. Before Dane got his claws in him, he was my brother." Edward pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "He knew you loved him. Even at the end, when he threw you those documents, he knew. That's why he did it." Evelyn nodded against his chest, letting herself grieve, for the brother she'd lost twice, once to Dane's manipulation and once to his own redemption. They lay in silence for a while, Edward's hand stroking her hair while she cried quietly. Finally, she lifted her head to look at him. "I love you," she whispered. "Thank you for letting me feel this. All of it." "I love you too," he said back, wiping her tears with his thumb. "For the rest of our lives, the complicated parts included." She kissed him softly, tasting salt and promises, and let herself believe in the future they were building together. Evelyn closed her eyes, listening to his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the fear, the pain, the impossible choices. And she thought about the northern bridge, where her brother had pushed her into the river, where she'd given up, ready to die. She'd closed her eyes expecting darkness. Instead, she'd found Edward, found love, found a future she'd never dared imagine. She'd survived a monster, found a king, and built a love worth fighting for. And that, she thought as sleep pulled her under, was the best kind of ending. Or perhaps the best kind of beginning. How would you rate this story from 1 to 10? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts. And if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.